I've got a pluck oscillator set up here, and I've tweaked it a bit since the last video, and this is what it sounds like. And I want to look at using script processors to help bring this to life. Now, script processors are used for general event processing, the way we would think of an arpeggiator or something like that, where they process the incoming MIDI notes and then feed that processed variation of the MIDI notes to the oscillators. Now, I'm on the event processor browser here, and here are the script processors. There's a variety of types, but for now, I'm just going to drag a generic script processor. We can insert these on the horizontal event rows in either the program level or layer level. So I'm just going to drag it here for now. So before we look at using the scripts, I'm just going to give you an overview of how this works. We're not going to get into writing our own Lua scripts and creating our own scripts. It's a little beyond the scope of this series. But the idea is here we can load a script with here. It'll open up a load dialog box. We can add password protection if we're creating our own. We can edit the script, and then we can watch for script changes. And then over here, we can reload the script. We can show the console output, and we can clear the console. This is all great for when you're working on and developing your own scripts. But for now, I'm going to call up one of the pre-made scripts, and I'm going to go into sequencing, and let's call up the new Euclidean tonal sequencer. So here, this looks complex, but it's actually pretty simple. I'm going to play one note. We see a little play icon when it's active. And it's basically a sequencer where we can generate notes, and each row is a different note with a bunch of properties. So we have a power button for each row. I'll just put one on for the moment. And we have the hit to set the number of hits that we want. Lower that. You can see here it introduces rests into it. Steps refers to the number of steps in the whole sequence. And then we can offset where they start. So for example, here, it's starting with 3 hits. If I offset it, that rest will fall in a different coupling or grouping. Now, accent allows us to set the step interval of the accented triggers. So which step is going to get accented? It's the 5th. And then we can offset that. You get a lot of nice variations for the patterns you can create. And ratio, it sets this part speed relative to the resolution down here, which is set at 16th notes. So I can set the ratio, let's say, to 2. And it's dividing it in half. But we can create all kinds of complex offsets by setting the different rows to different ratios. And then we have the degree, which sets the degree relative to the master key over here. So right now, this is playing the root. I'm hitting a C right now. If I set this to 2, it's going to trigger a D. There, it's going to trigger the E, etc. And the idea is to turn on multiple rows. They're all doing the same thing now, but that's the idea, to set up complex chordal patterns. And then we have a velocity page where we can set for each of these steps the velocity for the notes and then the accented notes. So you can, again, really get some nice variations happening. And you see here a representation of all the notes that are being triggered. Here we have the 1st, 3rd, and 4th. So here we set the resolution, the key, and the mode, and we have some presets. So let me set this to maybe E minor. And we have gate time to shorten the notes. But when you're working with the pluck oscillator, we can always get into some nice variations using these decay roll-offs. But let's call up one of the preset scripts here. I'm going to go for one that I like called Tonic Blast. And it sets these all up with different numbers of hits and different offsets. So I'm going to hit one note. Do it lower. I'm going to play a little sequence where I have just the root note triggered. And we can play with these controls here to get more of a muted sound. We can even play with this. Get a bit of a muted sound. You get all kinds of nice variations possible. Let me just reset this. And let's continue. So I'm going to go back up here and I'm going to turn off all the rows except the first. So this is going to act as basically a monophonic step sequencer. All right, that's working great. Now let's add another script processor. Here, I'm going to go into harmonization and let's go tonal harmonizer. So I can take these single notes and harmonize them. And this is fairly intuitive. I'm going to, again, set the key here to E minor. And we can set, I want the first degree, third degree, fifth degree of the scale. We can set the octave, the velocity amount, and offset the panning. Let's add in the seventh. Make that one quieter. And then we have different voicings. And here's some guitar voicings. And same thing here, we can play with this. So it's working really nicely. Let's continue building this up with another script processor. I'm going to go into the performance section and call up a strum preset. So now we can turn these into strums. I can set the direction. Let's alternate. We can spread out the chords. Just a little bit to keep them loose. We can humanize that and offset the velocity. And let's try setting this up. Put this a bit above. What I'm going to do is modulate this with a two-step pattern so we can alternate between muted and non-muted notes. So let's just set this to 2. Well, I can go a bit higher. We'll get a little bit more of an interesting pattern. Let's go to 3 or 4. Let's set the depth lower. So some are muted, some aren't. We can get more complex patterns. Interesting. So that's a little introduction to using script processors, really sophisticated ways of processing incoming MIDI. We'll continue with more in the next video.